What's up, folks, and welcome to Retro Ramble. So, this is something kind of neat that I've got for you today. This may be looking like I'm playing an old school NES game, and well, that's half right. So, this is something that is really interesting, and I love to see more of this stuff coming out. So, this is Trophy, and it looks like an NES game because, well, it is. This is a game developed by an interesting little team who makes games for the NES that can actually run on the NES, that you can actually get on an NES cartridge, but they also give them releases on modern systems as well. And this is a super niche cottage industry, and I think it's just fascinating. People making new games on the NES within the constraints of that system, which are obviously very limited, and which requires some, a level of programming knowledge and expertise that, frankly, a lot of people don't have anymore. What's required to program an NES is not something you can do with an off-the-shelf engine like you used to be able to. And I think this is really neat. And this is published by a new publisher that is actually a collaboration between a couple of other retro-focused companies, or modern retro-focused companies, who have been putting these games out on modern systems to give them exposure to a wider audience. And yeah, this is interesting. It's definitely not going to be for everybody, but it's not intended to be either. And I wanted to show it off to you here. So this game actually has a story. You've been sort of seeing it play out here. The closest thing I can equate this to is Mega Man, but not quite. And I'll explain why that is. So first things first here, let's talk about this collection and what, modern quality of life options it brings. Not much. So you can view the manual, which is pretty good here. It actually explains, the controls well, the different power-ups, the enemies, the stages, all of these different things here that sort of help you go through everything. In terms of options for the game, there's screen border. That's it. Yeah. There's no scan line options, there's no save states, there's no ability to change the screen ratio, no sound options, nothing. The game plays in 4x3, and you can pick one of, 3 different backgrounds or no backgrounds for it if you want. Yeah, pretty bare bones, and I gotta tell you, that's not super impressive to me. Collections like this, even ones often put out, even collection or retro re-releases that are considered not that good, you have a lot more options than this. This is totally functional. It absolutely is. But there's a bar that they don't hit on that front, which is a little bit disappointing. But so the way this works is you start the game and you pick one of the different levels you can go through to try to complete the story and get to the final boss. So the cool thing about this is there are 8 different, much like Mega Man, there are 8 different levels available, and you can attack them in any order, which is really cool. All the environments in this are very different. They all have different kinds of enemies in them. There are lots of different ways to play through this, and you can work at whatever way is most effective for you. Now, the thing about this, you may have heard me say at the beginning, there's no save states. So you may be like, well, how do you, save your progress so that you can continue on if you take out a few levels and want to come back later? You go whole old school with it. So you use a password system. This game does have a password in it, which for those of you who are too young to remember, back in the NES days, only some cartridges could actually save your game. And those cartridges were more expensive to produce because they had to have a battery in them and non-volatile memory in them. And that was very expensive at the time. So the way a lot of companies got around this is they used a password system, which would be they develop an algorithm where you can enter a password, and depending on what you entered, that would dictate what you had available to you going into the game in terms of weapons, completion, story progression, things like that. And people in some ways like those systems because if you could find from, magazines or from other people you could find out passwords that would let you sort of cheat your way through the game. Well, that's what this uses. And a lot of people are going to go, are you telling me a game in 2023 doesn't have the ability to save your game and you have to use a password? That is exactly what I'm telling you. A lot of people are going to be like, yeah, no, thank you. I'm not going to lie. I think it's kind of ridiculous that you have to do that. I appreciate the commitment to the old school way of doing things, but that's a bit of a bridge too far for most people, I think. Actually having to write a password down so that you don't lose your game when you come back to it on an Xbox, it seems a little insane. But that's the way it goes. So that's how this works. And you're going to go through all these different environments, take out all the enemies, take out the boss, and eventually you're going to try to get through all of those so that you can take on the big baddie and finish things up. And obviously that's very Mega Man-ish. What's not Mega Man-ish about this, though, is that, and some people might like this for the sort of purity of it, other people probably won't, is that there are no special weapons in this. So you see I'm using sort of the pea shooter here, which is like the default weapon in Mega Man. That's all you get in this. The thing that people liked about the Mega Man games is every boss was unique, and every boss had its own unique weapon. And when you would defeat a boss, you would adopt its ability, and you could switch to that weapon to use it. And while you could finish any enemy with the standard weapon and actually approach the levels in any way you wanted in that series, every game had an ideal order. So a lot of the bosses were susceptible to specific other bosses' weapons. And if you learned that order, you could beat the game more easily. Some bosses would go down in like 2 hits if you were using the weapon they were weak against. There's none of that here. You can attack the levels in any way you want, and some people are going to like this, like I said, the sort of purity of having a fully equal playing field no matter what. But yeah, if you're looking for a different take on that Mega Man formula, you're not going to find that here. You don't, the game is a little more generous with things like extra lives and stuff than the Mega Man games are, and there are some power-ups you can pick up that will increase your power, but there are no special weapons in this to pick up at all, which, yeah, seems like quite a missed opportunity, because that was one of the main things that made Mega Man really special. And to not have that seems odd to me. It does. At the same time, though, it's nice in a way for the simplicity of being able to come into any level with the same gun, learning how that gun works, learning how to completely maximize that and learn how to play that the best way possible and how to really make use of that. There is something nice about that and uncomplicated. And I will give credit where it's due. I think that is kind of cool. And to be honest, I don't think this game is like that because they refuse to, they just weren't competent enough or refused to do it that way. I think it was that's what they wanted. I think they wanted a game that had that sort of simplicity of concept where it's the basics are very easy to understand, but it's a game that's still going to require a lot of practice and patience to learn and get good at. And I can respect that. I can. I think if that's what they were going for, then they succeeded at that. That's definitely going to not be for everyone. If you're someone who loves the Mega Man games and wants something that you want the new Mega Man game that Capcom's not making, then in that 8-bit style, that's not this. You are probably better served by picking up Mega Man Legacy Collection or something like that to give you that old school style of play. But this does still have the variety in levels and enemies. Some of the bosses, I will say, are way easier. Like, oddly enough, this boss is one of the harder ones I've encountered so far, despite the fact that we're at the first level. Some of the bosses in the later levels you can select have actually been the ones that I've had an easier go of. But it's all, it's old school. It's all about pattern recognition and learning the different attacks in that. I will say that you will sometimes get frustrated with this because, like an old school NES game, when an enemy leaves the screen, if you get an enemy off the screen and you restore that part of the screen by scrolling backwards, they respawn. So you got to be cognizant of that. When you've taken out an enemy, that doesn't mean he's gone. He's going to come back. And that's something that you definitely want to be aware of with that. And like I said, the thing that I find the coolest about this kind of game is this little cottage industry of these really, hardcore developers who were like, I want to not only have to program an NES in the difficult way you have to program an NES in 2023, but I want to make games that are constrained by hardware from the better part of 40 years ago. God, I'm old. And that is a very unique challenge that most developers are not up for. They're trying to, they want to make a full game within 40-year-old technological constraints. And I think that is the coolest thing ever, that people are willing to try that out. It's something I certainly couldn't do. If I could program at all, I definitely couldn't do this. So I think it's really, really neat to see this being attempted. And I'm glad that these are coming out. Like, I'm the kind of, retro enthusiast nut job who would buy games like this on an NES cartridge. Most people are not that, and these guys know that, and I think that's why they're trying to get these titles put out in a wider array of formats to make them more accessible to more people. I think that's great. I'm glad I'm glad we have this. I'm glad it's happening, but nonetheless, this game appeals to a niche within a niche, and if you're part of that niche, you're probably going to dig it. If you're not, you might get into it. You might try it out and be like, yeah, this is cool. It's old school hard, and it's got that kind of old school charm to it, and I want to give it a go. And that would be awesome. But most people, I think, will be turned off by this, and it doesn't detract from the fact that the lacking quality of life features in this game, this is the most stripped down one of these I've possibly ever seen. And I know it's made by a tiny developer, but to me, that doesn't excuse that. There needs to be more stuff in here. I really think there should be save states in here, at the very least. And retro enthusiasts who would potentially pick something like this up are going to want things like those scan line options. I don't care about those. I really don't. I never have. But that's a me thing. People who want that stuff really want that stuff. And I think not having that is alienating part of the hardcore niche within a niche that frankly is the target audience for this thing. So if they do more releases like this, I hope they take that into account. This modern framework that this game is running on seems to be through Unity, because I saw a Unity logo when I started it up. So Unity is more than capable of doing a lot of that stuff, and possibly even with plugins you can get out of the Unity store. So I hope that's something they consider for future releases, because I think a lot of people are going to look at this and go like, so, I'm paying to just basically play an NES emulator on my Xbox, except it's only one game. And that is kind of what you're doing, to be honest with you. But I think it's cool. I've been enjoying it. Will I finish it? Maybe, I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but possibly. As you can see right here, this is a game that requires you to learn the level, because, like right there, if you don't learn the way to fall down that stuff, you're going to die on an instant death spike. That's a thing. So something it's a very neat curiosity and a very interesting thing that I'm glad exists. But it's definitely not going to be for everyone. But I'm certain that the people who made this and the people who published it know that this is not going to be for everybody. It's not intended to be. So I have no problem whatsoever with developers wanting to appeal to a niche. It just feels like they left out a lot of the stuff that niche would really want. And that's a bit confusing to me. But I wanted to show this to you anyway, because I do think it's cool and I'd like to see more of this stuff come out on modern systems. So yeah, that is Trophy. It is out now. If you want to buy it on the NES, you could just do it that way if you want, but it's a little bit more accessible on platforms like the Xbox. So maybe it's, you might be better served getting it that way if you don't want to go quite that hardcore with it. It's interesting, but you got to know if you're part of that tiny group before you get into it, I think. So thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. They do help the channel out a lot, and I would really, really appreciate that. And leave a comment down below. Tell me, what do you think of this? Are you interested in giving it a try? Do you think this is something that would appeal to you? what other kinds of games would you like to see get like not a modern re-release of an old game, but something inspired by an old game, like how this is inspired by Mega Man? What other stuff would you love to see get a new lease on life through a new release or something like that? I think that'd be really cool. I certainly have some thoughts of that of my own. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover other indie games as well as actual retro stuff over there, including a lot of stuff better suited to streaming than YouTube. We have a fantastic community there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I will see you on the next Retro Ramble. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.